Let's jump right into this explainer. Imagine being stripped of literally everything you know, placed in total isolation, and having your sanity tested for cash. Today, we're looking at an absolutely wild social experiment that did exactly that, testing the extreme limits of human endurance and the heavy psychological weight of money.
To start us off, I really want you to put yourself directly in their shoes. 100 days, a totally blank, featureless white room, and a complete stranger. If someone handed you the keys to that room right now, do you honestly think you could make it all the way to the end? Because the prize waiting in the vault was a staggering $500,000. For two everyday subjects, Bailey and Suzie, this was genuinely life-changing money. We're talking paying off houses, erasing debt, setting up their futures. But securing that bag, it was going to test them in ways they literally couldn't imagine.
Here's the real kicker, though. They weren't just fighting their own isolation. They had to rely entirely on a stranger's willpower. If Bailey cracked and walked out, Suzie got nothing. If Suzie couldn't take it, Bailey went home empty-handed. Their individual success was 100% bound to the mental resilience of someone they had literally just met on day one. Now, what's really fascinating about these conditions is how they look totally safe, but are actually designed for extreme psychological deprivation. Sure, they had food and a bed, but the environment was the enemy. The lights were blindingly bright and never, ever turned off. No windows, no clocks, no idea what day it was. The only dark refuge in the whole place was their tiny private bathroom. So, let's talk about the psychological toll. Part 1. Honestly, it is wild how fast the human brain just scrambles for structure when you take away routine. By night 1, their internal clocks were so broken they only slept for 2 hours. By day 4, they were ripping up their journals just to make playing cards. They even cleverly faked a sign-in sheet to trick the camera crew into giving them the date. But by day 7, they were literally throwing pieces of canned pork against the wall out of pure boredom, just whipping it at the wall. And the creators didn't just leave them in a white room. Oh no. They systematically introduced temptations designed to drain that prize fund. Every 10 days, they were offered these incredible luxuries. But the catch was, any luxury they accepted had to be paid for right out of their $500,000 shared pool. Which brings us to part 2, resisting expensive temptations. At first, Bailey and Suzie were like a fortress. On day 10, after eating nothing but bland canned chicken, they got their first massive test. They were shown the sky for the first time in over a week and offered a private chef who would cook them fresh meals for the remaining 90 days. The cost? A massive $50,000, 10% of the total prize. Astonishingly, they turned it down without even blinking, simply saying, "Nope, I think we decided no." They chose to suffer through the repetitive meals just to protect their cash. They knew temporary comfort wasn't worth permanently losing 50 grand. But the tests kept getting harder. By day 20, those constant blinding lights were literally stinging their eyes. They couldn't sleep properly. So the creators offered them high-end smart beds and an iPod that could turn off the agonizing overhead lights. Again, the price tag was $50,000. And I find it absolutely fascinating that they rejected it again. They valued the future payout over their immediate physical comfort. Think about that. Signing up for 80 more days of stinging eyes and bad sleep just to ensure that number in the vault didn't drop. Their willpower early on was truly something else. But moving into part 3, the breaking point and regret. Because willpower is a finite resource, right? The dam eventually breaks. On day 30, they decided 10 grand was worth having a daily coffee, another 10,000 went to some books, and once they allowed themselves those small comforts, the psychological barrier was just gone. By day 50, they dropped $20,000 for a deeply emotional 10-minute family visit. Their strict frugality was slowly unwinding. Then came day 60, bringing a huge psychological gamble that would completely flip the dynamic of the room. The creators brought in this giant, locked mystery box. They asked the contestants if they wanted to spend $50,000 to keep whatever was inside, sight unseen. They debated it, but because they played it safe, they declined. And here is the brilliant, cruel twist. The creators opened the box to reveal $50,000 in cash, meaning it would have paid for itself, along with the keys to 2 brand new Teslas. No way, right? Because they said no, they completely missed out on a massive, unadvertised reward. The resulting regret was just catastrophic. Suzie admitted she felt physically sick to her stomach. This one decision ruined their morale for over a week. The psychological weight of what they missed out on ended up hurting them far more than the isolation itself. Which led to a massive strategic pivot on day 70. They were offered a blind auction for every single item they had previously rejected. Tired of missing out, kicking themselves over the cars, and just exhausted by the room, they went all in. They bid over $100,000 to secure a massive bundle of luxuries for the final stretch. They basically finally bought their peace of mind.
So, Part 4. The Final Dilemma. You'd think the final 30 days would be a total breeze with a luxury suite, right? But human psychology is funny. Once their major physical needs were met, their social dynamic actually began to fray. They started bickering over the pettiest things. Baelia using up all the hot water, Suzie refusing to play Monopoly. But despite all those annoyances, they held it together and successfully reached day 100.
They survived the time. But the creators had one final, brutal psychological test waiting for them at the finish line. A classic prisoner's dilemma. They had to secretly lock in a choice: split or steal. It forced them to choose between immense personal greed and ultimate trust in the stranger they just spent months trapped with. And remember, if they both steal, neither gets a dime. As Bailey weighed his decision, he said something really profound. He realized that the shared trauma of the 100 days ultimately forged a bond that transcended the money. Overcoming those dark times meant there was no price you could put on that experience. They started as total strangers fighting for cash, but they evolved into a team that survived intense deprivation together. And in the end, trust won out over greed. The room turned green. Both of them chose to split, and they each walked away with half of the remaining $360,000. That is still a genuinely life-changing payout, earned through extreme endurance and ultimate cooperation. So, I'll leave you with this. It's incredibly easy to say what we do from the comfort of our homes. We like to think we'd be generous. But if you had just spent 100 days losing your sanity, giving up your normal life, and sacrificing a massive chunk of the prize money just to survive, it truly makes you wonder what you're actually capable of when pushed to the absolute limit. Would you have hit split? Or would you have taken it all? Thanks for exploring this with me today. Let that question linger.